Social media has totally wrecked us. And it is really hard to put yourself in a position where I am this brand new photographer. I'm really trying to fine tune my craft, but naturally I'm following all of these incredible photographers. And it is almost impossible to stay in your own lane and not get frustrated that you are on a different path or at a different point in your path than they are. We just see them and we think that that is immediately attainable without remembering that it has taken them years and years and years to get to where they are. But if it's making you feel frustrated because how can they be there and I'm all the way over here, it's not a healthy spot to be in.
Hey, welcome to episode 320 of the Beginner Photography Podcast, brought to you by CloudSpot, the easiest way to deliver and sell photos online. I am your host, Raymond Hatfield, and today we're chatting with lifestyle, newborn, and family photographer Sabrina Gebhardt about avoiding burnout so that you can stay creative. You know, when I first got started in photography, I remember, several times, honestly, where I feel like I was trying to learn so much, so many things, all the techniques, and finding that my images were just not coming out the way that I was expecting, that I was hoping. Especially for the amount of work that I was putting into to learning photography. So there were several times where, honestly, I felt burnt out. I would take long breaks, and when you feel like you need to just walk away because you're frustrated, well, that's not serving anybody, right? You're not going to experience any growth in that time. Now, I'm not talking about, taking a break because you've been working hard at something. I'm talking about when you feel like you need to take a break because you've been overworking yourself towards something. That's a big difference. Now, that is when I wish, starting out, that I would have had somebody like a Sabrina Gebhardt in my life to help me rein in that feeling of overwhelm. And maybe, I would have learned photography faster, maybe gained my confidence faster, understood what I was trying to say with my photography faster. And that is the aim of today's interview. So with that, I know that you're going to get a lot out of this one. Let's go ahead and get on into today's interview with Sabrina Gebhardt. Sabrina, I know that you came from the corporate world before you got into photography. So tell me, when did you know that photography was going to play an important role in your life?
Yeah, I am one of those people that in high school, I had a camera with me all the time. So I have thousands and thousands of photos of like us at parties, us at drill team, us at football games, us in math class. I mean, just life. Like I loved having a camera on hand, and both of my parents were really into the amateur thing. Like we had a dark room we would set up in our garage. Wow. And my dad loved to do landscapes, and my mom loved what we now call lifestyle photography, just casually capturing my brother and I with family and engaging with friends. So there was always a camera around me, and I grew up with that. When I went to college, I really thought when I started out, like back in the day, you could be general studies as a freshman. That's like not a thing anymore. But right. Back then you could be general studies because they wanted you to test the waters. And I really thought I may take a photography class. And then I didn't. And I actually put the camera down for my entire college experience.
Oh, no.
Like no camera, never. I just kind of changed my identity because I was trying new things. And then right out of college, I got a corporate job, which I absolutely loved. And there was no photography inside of it whatsoever. And then just like everybody else, I became a mom. And as soon as my daughter was born, the camera came back out. By then, the world had gone digital. And so while I was shooting with a film camera, it wasn't shiny and new like a digital. And so very quickly I asked for a digital camera and I wanted to learn the mechanics of that. But it was different, right? It was a learning curve to that. And I loved photographing her, and it just reignited that spark that I'd had, right? And the funny thing is, I was a Girl Scout when I was a kid, and we were moving a few years ago, and I was going through just boxes of stuff. And I have this little Girl Scout album from when I was like 8 years old. And there's all these things. What's your favorite color? What's your favorite food? All these things. And what do you want to be when you grow up? And it says photographer there.
Way.
I was literally mind blown that my 8-year-old self had manifested this life. So
That is so funny. What do you think it is
Yeah.
like at 8 years old, as somebody who well, my son is 9 now. And when I look at him, and I think that we have this idea to ask kids, like, what do you want to be when you grow up? Even though there's
Yeah.
no idea they could possibly know, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I know that you had influences by your parents, but like, as far as the things that you were shooting, what do you think it was about photography that stood out so strongly for you to say, I want to be a photographer at 8 years old?
Yeah, I really do think it was just the parental influence. My dad never shared the dream to like want to take that professionally. He was really just enjoyed doing it as a hobby. But I think my mom had vocalized a few times that if she were in a career, that's the one she would have taken. And the reason I say I think it's the parental influence is because my 14-year-old daughter says the exact same thing.
Wow.
What do I want to be when I grow up? I either want to be an art teacher or a photographer. Like that's currently her thing that she's been saying for a few years. And so the only, I put two and two together. I said that and I watched my mom with a camera and she says that and she watches me. So I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you think back to some of those photos that you were taking at 8 years old, obviously now there's a large gap in
Right.
in the quality that has gone up over the years.
Sure.
If you go back and you look at those photos, tell me, maybe not even from a technical perspective, but like, what were the things that you love most about taking photos? Was it the subjects that you were photographing? Was it
Yeah.
spending time looking at the photos after they were developed? What was it?
So it's the same things that I like to do now, honestly. And when you asked that question, I was like, oh my God, it's literally the same things. It is freezing time and capturing joy. And
Mm,
those are the two things that I love the most. And as a lifestyle photographer, I value the most. I value being able to freeze time and moments for my clients who either just had a baby and they're in the hospital, or it's kids with their grandparents who aren't going to be alive for a few more years. It's freezing that time, but then capturing joy is huge for me. And genuine laughter and silliness and being able to see a family let their guard down and really be real. That's the same kind of photos I was taking then of our friends having hilarious antics, and being silly and those kind of moments. Is that genuine, joyful subject.
yeah, I have a very similar affinity to those types of photos as well. I know that
Mhm.
I actually recently bought. This is going to sound like very blasphemous, but I bought a little point and shoot camera. Right,
Awesome.
this thing
Yeah.
is like 12 years old. Right, just because I
Yeah.
wanted to prove to myself, I guess, that oftentimes, especially for new photographers, they have this feeling that like settings are everything. Once I know settings, like the quality of the photo is going to go up. And I found that personally, the photos that I love most are the ones with that joy, with that moment, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because anybody can take a technically perfect photo, I think. But a lot of what goes into making a photo stand out is waiting for that right moment, waiting for that joy, and then
Right.
capturing that right then. So, getting back to new photographers, and one of the things
Yeah.
that they struggle with a lot is those settings, right?
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Yep.
Especially, you start shooting in manual. It's like you got the
Oh
shutter
yeah.
speed, aperture, ISO, all these things that you have to worry about. And I know that that can cause overwhelm for many people because it can feel like there are so many things that you have to learn.
Yep.
Since you had got started earlier in photography and you had parents that were also photographers, did you have to go through that same struggle when you got back into photography later in
Oh yeah.
life?
I
Hmm.
did for sure. I think that my eye had stayed the same, and maybe that's something that was so ingrained in me to watch for those moments. And I've never been one that enjoys shooting landscape or still life or pets or flowers or anything like that, because we shot families and emotion and moments. And so I think the artistic vision was still there, but the technical side, I mean, sure, I'd walked away from it for like 7 years. And again, things had gone from film, and I wasn't shooting manual as a teenager by any means. Um, so learning manual and learning digital at the same time, there was definitely a learning curve.
Mm.
And just like you said, beginners focus so much on getting everything right, and it causes them to not see the full picture. They're so worried about getting the bokeh and getting the right light and getting the color correction correct and then editing and all this, that they can miss the genuine stuff. Um, and that's why I think that once photographers have really learned to flex that muscle to shoot in manual and they've got it down, that things start to relax and we're not so serious anymore. Like
Yeah.
we realize that we've learned the rules, we can break the rules, and we've learned the rules and now it's time to have fun and express ourselves. But that really just comes with time. Like you can't ever tell a brand new photographer to do that. I mean, you can tell them and tell them and tell them, but they're not going to. They have to like learn and cross that bridge themselves.
And that's a very difficult thing. That's a very difficult
Yeah.
thing
Oh, yeah.
because I think we live in this world, especially with YouTube, that makes it look so easy. Photography is
Right.
so simple. It's so easy. You just go out, and it makes it even more difficult when there's some 19-year-old college student who has no responsibilities in life except for,
Right.
to take amazing photos, who's trying to tell you, how to shoot. And that can be challenging. So
Yeah.
again, this feeling of overwhelm is something that is very predominant in new photographers. So having gone through that yourself, trying to learn manual, pick out all these things, how do you start to deal with that? Is it just this idea that one day I'll get it and I just have to push through this, or is there something else that we can do to ease our way through that transitional period?
Yeah. I think knowing that you're going to experience that discomfort and that overwhelm and that learning curve, knowing that that's normal, that everybody goes through that is part of it. Because so often we can feel like, why does it look so easy for her or him? And why is it so hard for me? And you kind of beat yourself up and that negative self talk and stuff. But when people are honest about the process, this is what it's like. We all couldn't figure it out for a long time. It takes time to really master. Knowing that that's part of the process and that you can expect that discomfort is part of it. And then the second part is truly shooting as much as you can, because the more you shoot, the faster you get over the hump. The more you put in the work, the more you try out different subjects and different people's kids and different whatever lighting scenarios and all of that. The more you do it, the faster you will get through it. And everybody says that, but it's true. There's
Right.
no fast track, I mean, it is what you have to work through the muck to get over to the other side.
Yeah. Well, then tell me, because one of the things that happens talking to a lot of professional photographers like yourself is
Mm-hmm.
that,
Mm-hmm.
I'll say, what were those early days like? And it's like, it was difficult, you shoot as much as you can, excuse me, and then you get through it. But I think a lot of the people are in that middle stage right now, so in that feeling of possibly burnout. So can you tell me, maybe from your own experience, of a time where early on in photography you had felt burnout and maybe thought about possibly giving up? Was that ever a thought that came into your mind?
Yeah. I think I know that I made the same mistake that a lot of beginners do, and that is I jumped into business way before I had any business being open. I had mastered manual technically, right? But I was still not consistent. I really had no clue what I was doing with editing. And I for sure had no clue what I was doing as far as running a business. I was taking on every single client that came to me, which I was very lucky that immediately upon deciding to be in business, I was flooded because it was all of our peers and church group and friends and preschool friends and all of that. Um, and almost immediately I hit burnout because I went from, oh, this is so fun. I'm doing it a little bit every day and practicing a little bit every day, to shooting all the time, every evening, every weekend, multiple families. I literally threw myself in the deep end. And it was exciting. I will say that it was exciting that people wanted to quote unquote pay me money and I was, in business. But I was so overwhelmed with still not having that confidence that comes with experience. Instead of easing myself into business and saying, I'm still learning and I'm still practicing, but I'm going to take one client. I'm going to take on this one thing. I'm going to test the waters. I just literally jumped straight in and was like, cool, I'm open. And I was number one, shooting too much. And number two, I was trying to overpromise everyone. I was trying to make everybody happy taking on anything. Sure, I'll shoot that. Sure, I'll shoot. Yeah, I'll do that. Just completely disregarding what I wanted. And I was also completely disregarding myself and my personal life. Like I had
Mhm.
jumped so far into this passion that it was consuming. It was all consuming. And then I was looking at the work that I was producing and I was frustrated because it wasn't the same as this person over here who'd been in business for 10 years. It wasn't the same as this incredible artist in the industry. And I was beating myself up. And so it was this really ugly cycle of overwork, not enough time to myself, negative self talk because I wasn't where I wanted to be. I wasn't enjoying the process at all.
Mhm. But isn't that just like, now I'm going to play devil's advocate here, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Isn't because I went through a similar phase
yeah.
early on in my photography journey, and it almost felt like, maybe am I just paying my dues here? Like, isn't this what I'm supposed to do? I live in this little town. There's a lot of, quote unquote competition out there.
Mhm.
How can I expect to stand out and make a business, if that's what you want to do, um, without feeling like you have to hustle, hustle, hustle and do as much as possible?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's something to that for sure. Because we do all start at the bottom. I do think social media has kind of ruined us
Hmm.
and making that worse, because when I started off, this was before Instagram.
Yeah.
Okay. This was back in the good old glory days of Facebook where you could throw up something and everybody saw it and everybody liked it and there was no drama. Um, it was back just in the good old days. And starting a business, like I tell people that was right around the time that Etsy had gotten started. And so this whole freelance creative entrepreneur, everybody's starting a business, doing the thing and selling the thing that they love. Like it was kind of a boom, right? And it was easy because we weren't fighting with Instagram. It didn't exist. We weren't fighting with Facebook. We could just put our stuff out there and we would get business. And so we did all jump in too early. We were like, I like this thing. I have the supplies for it. Might as well make some money,
Hmm.
right? Um, and there is something to that. But after having been in the industry for as long as I have and having met as many photographers as I have, which the same with you, there are a lot of people who did not start out that way. There are a lot of people who were like, nope, tap the brakes. I'm going to be very intentional. I'm only going to step in when I'm ready. I'm going to charge premium pricing from the beginning. I'm going to be real good at what I do. And they skipped over all that stuff. So that makes me think, is it a personality trait?
Mm.
Are there some of us that, jump before we're ready on the regular? Because I've seen it done plenty of times.
Hey, Raymond here, and we will get back to today's interview in just a moment. But first, did you know that shooting a manual is the choice of professional photographers all over the world for one reason? It gives them full control of their camera so that they can capture the image that they visualize in their head. But how do you know which settings for you to use and when? Well, let me help you out with my free ebook, Picture Perfect Camera Settings, that you can grab for yourself over at perfectcamerasettings.com. In it, I share images that I've shot over the years with real camera settings and the info on knowing which setting is the most important to change in which situations so that you can be on your way to learning manual mode too. More than 3,000 photographers just like you have downloaded it already, so grab your copy today at perfectcamerasettings.com. Now, let's get back to today's interview. I guess it's a difficult question to answer now, especially when things have changed so much and continue to change so much. Like
Sure.
this time next year, I guess that the answer to that question would be completely different. So, okay, so let's look at then potentially where photographers are now, which is in this feeling of hustle, hustle, hustle. I got to do it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, another one of the things that I hear a lot from photographers is that they're worried about starting a business because if they do decide to do that, then they're worried that it's going to take all of the joy out of photography itself, right? Which I
Yeah.
think at its core, once again, is that feeling of burnout, right? That
Yeah.
feeling of an obligation towards this thing that you saw so much joy in, which is now
Yep.
consuming large portions of your life. So, do you have any tips on ways that even if people don't want to, they don't want to get into the business side, but they're overwhelmed with just the amount of things that they have to think about or worry about or learn in photography. Do you have any tips on ways to mitigate that feeling so that we can maybe, I don't want to say slowly get into photography, but so that we can learn photography in a way that doesn't just wreck us and make us want to sell
Yeah.
all of our gear in the next, 6 months?
Yeah. So there's so many facets to that
There
question,
is.
and there's
It was a
so
big
many different
question. I
types of answers.
apologize. Yeah.
No, but so I'm going to throw out a couple of different things that speak to different points. But first of all, and I say this all the time, and this is kind of a common phrase, but staying in your own lane. It is, again, social media has totally wrecked us. Okay. Like, good or bad, we see what everybody else is doing. We see what our neighbors are doing. We see what these industry greats are doing. And it is really hard to put yourself in a position where, I am this brand new photographer. I love taking pictures. I'm really trying to fine tune my craft. I think I may want to open a business. But naturally, I'm following all of these incredible photographers. And it is almost impossible to stay in your own lane and not get frustrated that you are on a different path or at a different point in your path than they are. You know, we just see them and we think that that is immediately attainable without remembering that it has taken them years and years and years to get to where they are. And so keeping your eyes on your own paper, staying in your own lane, maybe unfollowing those people that sure you might aspire to, you might love them. They might, have wonderful work that is beautiful that you love to look at. But if it's making you feel frustrated because how can they be there and I'm all the way over here, it's not a healthy spot to be in. You're just going to continue to frustrate yourself. You cannot compare yourself to anyone that is anywhere else other than at the beginning, at the starting line with you, right?
Yes.
Because that leads to only frustration, right? Only frustration. The other thing I would say is I personally, and through the way that I have grown my own business and the path that I have taken, and then seeing the path that some of my students have taken, I always highly recommend investing actual cash money into education as early as possible, because it is a fast track. It does get you past a lot of those frustration points a lot sooner, whether it be the technical skills or the business skills or the life skills needed to manage a business and a household or whatever it is, right? It kind of gets you in the secret. They let you in on things, and having a mentor and a cheerleader and people that can say, well, I made that mistake. Don't do what I did. Do this instead. Mm-hmm. Right? It's that little kind of that Staples easy button, So I feel like that is always really valuable when somebody is willing to invest in their business and take some education first, mm-hmm. Beyond just the YouTube and the blogs and the freebies,
Of course.
So I think those two things are really big. The other thing is, and I tell people this all the time, especially, I teach females. And so a lot of the women I teach are moms or thinking about becoming moms. And you have to have a heart-to-heart talk with yourself about what season of life you're in. And there are two paths that we can take. We can take the path of, I really, really feel called to being a stay-at-home mom when my kids are little. And that's wonderful. There's another path that is, my kids are little, but I feel really called to grow this thing. That's wonderful too. They cannot perfectly coexist at the same time. Right. One path is, I'm in charge of my children and I can maybe very slowly work on this craft and this hobby and grow this business in my free time, which there's not going to be a whole lot of, okay?
Yes.
Or I can say, I'm going to trust my children with childcare providers, whether it be an in-home nanny or daycare or a sitter a few days a week, so that I can grow this thing. Mm-hmm. Those are two different paths, and they're both wonderful, and there's no right or wrong, but you have to own up to which one you're going to take. And then giving yourself the grace to say, I'm going to stay home until my kids are all in school, and then I'm going to grow this thing. Mm. Or I'm going to grow this thing now, and I'm not going to feel guilty about having a nanny. Right?
Yes. Yes. So Okay, so obviously, I think that a lot of the avoiding overwhelm comes from clarity in
Hmm.
knowing exactly what you want, and that's kind of what we were talking about right there. Making the decision. What are you going to choose? Is it, staying at home with the kids, helping raise them, or focusing on growing your business here?
Hmm.
So once somebody makes that decision, let's say
Hmm.
for the sake of this podcast, because there's a lot of business podcasts out there, and we've spent a lot of time talking about kind of the business side today.
Hmm.
Let's say somebody wants to do it slowly, right? And
Hmm.
spend time with the kids. What
Hmm.
is that thing that they should focus on maybe first? Like, what are the first few things that they should focus on
Hmm.
before getting too deep in introducing fear and anxiety in their learning path?
So are we talking about they are comfortable in manual and technical and everything, and they're just kind of easing into business and while their kids are at home, or they're
So
not even ready for business yet?
not ready for business yet. Yeah, no.
Okay.
The majority of listeners of the podcast are those going from 0 to 1 rather than 1 to
Okay.
100.
Okay, great.
So they just picked up their camera at Costco or,
Hmm.
wherever it is. So what would be that first step for them?
Yeah. So really learning your camera inside and out. I know everybody says that, but I remember when I was doing the same, I kind of, as much as I loved my daughter, it got really boring shooting the same subject all the time. You know what I mean?
Of course.
Like, I knew exactly where to place her in my house. I knew exactly what lighting situation, exactly what time of day. Like, there was no, I mastered that one exact setting situation, but I didn't test the waters and everything else. And so being brave enough to bring your camera out of your house and to
Mm,
try stuff, which when you first have a DSLR, maybe it was just me, but I always got really nervous, like saying, I'm going to bring it to a play date or I'm going to bring it to the park. Like I didn't want to feel kind of ostentatious that like, let me get out my big camera and. So being brave enough to do that though makes a big difference because part of mastering your art is being able to shoot in different situations, different subjects, different skin tones, different lighting, all of that. And so test the waters. And if you're going to stay home with your kids, great. I'm sure they know other kids. I'm sure you're going to be at parks and playgrounds and play dates and vacations. And so being willing to take your camera with you and not be afraid to get it out, and try out all the different things, because that's where I feel like you really master it, is when you can walk into any lighting situation, when
hmm
you can walk into any group of kids or setup or whatever, and you know exactly what to do. That's when you have mastered it. It's not when you're standing there and you're like, hold on, let me take a test shot. Nope, that's not right. Let me adjust this. Nope, that's not, it's just knowing.
hmm
You have flexed that muscle memory in enough different situations that you know exactly what to do. Um, but also keeping it fun, because if this person is really just wanting to learn their camera and grow their art, it needs to be fun.
Yes.
Okay. There's no pressure. You're not giving these images to anybody. Nobody's paid for them. They don't have to go on a website. It is literally just for fun. Um, there were a few years where I would give myself like projects, and it would be, okay, this week I'm going to only shoot for black and white. So I'm going to look at light in ways that will really translate into black and white. Or this week I'm going to only photograph things that are red, and I would try and like really take advantage of the different, coloring and stuff. Or this week I'm only going to do really tight images or really pulled back wide shots. And so kind of giving yourself all these themes to play with can be really fun. And then people talk about 365s all the time. And as hard as they are to do, they work.
Uh, yeah, of
They
course.
do. They
We
work.
we had somebody. Sorry, I was writing
No, you're
it
good.
down. I thought it was very poignant when we had somebody on the podcast. His name is Simon Ringsmith. He's been doing a 365. Well, now I guess for 8 years.
Oh,
I
man.
know, very very
That
incredible
is
stuff. Yeah,
impressive.
and same with Ashley Marston. She's
Yes.
one of the most memorable guests who we've had on the show. Who is
It's true. And when you talk to any great, they will tell you that that is the game changer.
yeah
365s are hard. I
yeah.
tried and failed many, many, many times. And what finally worked for me was kind of rewriting the rules on what a 365 actually was going to be
Oh,
for
how
me.
so?
Um, you look around and you hear people toss around the 365 and it's a photo every day and you're going to share it and you're going to, whatever. For me, that was too much pressure. It was too much pressure to perform. And I decided that I was going to only share it when I was really proud of it. So I was going to do it, but it was going to be literally for me. It wasn't going to put it on a blog. I wasn't going to, no hidden page, nothing. Like literally, I was just going to shoot it. And then I also took the pressure off myself to make it be with my big camera. I was like, you know what? An image is an image. I can take a great image on my phone.
Yeah.
And if that's the image that I get that day, it still counts. And then the third rule I gave myself is if I miss a day, I can pick back up the next day. So it doesn't have to be a true 365.
Right.
And that was the year that I did it.
Oh, wow.
Was the year that I rewrote the rules for myself. And I kind of going back to what I said earlier, I kept my eyes on my own paper. I stayed in my own lane and I stopped watching all of these peers and their 365s. And I was like, nope, this is the way that Sabrina's going to do it. And that's the year that I did it.
Yeah.
Oh,
that's so cool. That is incredible. I think it's so difficult. For me personally, I need some sort of guidelines or accountability to be able to do something. And I feel like if I'm left to making up the rules, I'm going to make it so relaxed, almost so that like I can't fail, but then I make it too relaxed, then I fail. So it's a
Right.
double-edged sword for sure.
Right.
But when you had said that, it actually reminded that Simon has not done a 365, but has done a weekly photo for the past 7-8 years. And one of his rules that he gave himself was that the photo, because he publishes a photo every week, he doesn't have to take the photo the week that he publishes it. Like he can take multiple photos in a week and then maybe schedule those out for anyway. Regardless, back to I think the point of what you were saying is that really figuring out how it's going to work for you is most important, because at the end of the day, it's you as the photographer who's looking to learn and grow, and it's not, the goal is not social interaction or likes or anything else. So if you can figure out how you can do that, that is really important. And I absolutely agree. I had a question though, going back to what you were saying about kind of the goal of a professional photographer is to be able to walk into kind of any lighting situation and still be able to capture the photo, whatever it is, with a technical proficiency that, you're going to capture that photo. So I have to ask, is that the litmus test that you gave yourself before diving into business, or was that a lesson that
No.
So that's what you wish that you had done.
Yeah, exactly. Like I said, I jumped into business way before I should have been in business. I was good enough. Okay. I did not get complaints on the images I was shooting. I had people asking me for a long time if they could hire me. So, I mean, I was good enough, but I did not have that amount of confidence that I was like, bring me anywhere. I'm good to go. I mean, no. I was definitely shooting, at golden hour, outside at a park with open shade, all the perfect, easy things. And I wasn't comfortable shooting in people's homes at that point, which is now basically all I do. I wasn't comfortable shooting in a hospital setting, which I do a lot of now. I definitely was not comfortable shooting in low light, which I do a lot of in the hospital and in people's homes. So that stuff came with time. But looking back, I think maybe you don't need to be 100% there to start your business and call yourself a professional, but you need to be really close. You need to have full confidence that you can make this machine work for you, that you know exactly what to do.
So how do you go from, shooting in the park, golden hour, open shade, people are loving it because that's a great look, and then giving yourself the space to be able to explore shooting in a hospital setting, because that's not something that many people find themselves in every day. So how do you ensure that you're able to work on your settings enough so that when that happens, you can capture that proficiently?
Yeah. So I realized pretty early on, within the first year, 18 months, that I got bored with the outside stuff. It felt too posed for me. Again, people love it. We've had our family photos taken like that. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it. There is a place for that. It just felt too traditional for me, even though I was doing it without people looking at the camera and in playful ways. It just didn't feel authentic to me and what I enjoyed. I enjoyed being in people's homes. And I realized that by number one, realizing that almost every photo I was taking of my own children was at home. And also, when I was given the opportunity to start photographing newborn sessions, I was in clients' homes. I was not utilizing a studio.
Mm.
And even though I was doing like the posy, sleepy baby stuff at that point, I was bringing all that stuff to them. Okay. And so I was setting up the beanbag and doing the posy little stuff. And then we would snap some shots in the living room or in the nursery with the whole family. And real quick, I realized that is what I like. I love how authentic people are at home. I love giving them the opportunity to look back at their images and remember this couch, remember that living room, remember, when we had that dog, because those aren't all things that you may not remember the park you photographed at, but you'll remember your first house, and so that I realized really quickly that was important. Now, as far as the proficiency part of it, I was definitely not proficient in the beginning. It was a huge learning curve. I would get so panicked if I walked into people's homes and they had navy blue walls and little tiny windows and dark leather furniture. I mean, my insides would just cry, and I would get so nervous. But I took courses, and that's where I started really investing in my education, because I was like, I want to learn how to do what they're doing. How does that look like that indoors? And between the investing in the education and taking courses and practicing a lot, going into a lot of homes, I now can tell you I can walk into anybody's house.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, I prefer the ones with big windows, but I can walk into anybody's house. And like I said, I photograph first 48s in the hospital all the time. And some of them are big and bright and beautiful, and some of them are dungeons.
Yes.
It's practice.
Yeah.
So
it's practice. And that is the thing I know that I really try to hammer in with new photographers. I sign off every episode with, the more that you shoot today, the better that you'll be tomorrow, because it is so true. And it feels easy for I think professional photographers to say that. So I'm glad that it's not just me saying that, but you as well, and you are the proof. By looking at your images, I can see why clients love what it is that you do for them, and that what you're able to produce is something that is really something that is going to be looked at, I think, for a long time. And enjoyed. And at the end of the day, that's what photography should be, right? It should be something that we can look back and enjoy this time that we're currently in and enjoy. Exactly. And unfortunately, with so many pieces of gear and so many settings and so many blogs and so many YouTube videos, it can be so hard to just slow down and enjoy the journey and take your advice and stay in your own lane and just shoot what you need to shoot to really learn and enjoy photography. So, Sabrina, this has been wonderful. I've really enjoyed this conversation with you today. We are, just here at the end of our time. So before I let you go, I know that there's going to be people who are excited to hear more about you and what it is that you do. So where can we find you online?
Yeah, I am on Instagram more than I should be, at at Sabrina Gebhardt Photography, which is kind of a mouthful, so I know you'll have the link. But I actually go live a couple times a month and just do like open Q&A for photographers, and those are always really fun because we get like a big mix of questions, and so that's a great place to start for people, is just to come pop into a Q&A and say hi and ask a question, get your question answered. But you can also find me online, sabrinagebhardt.com, and I have tons of freebies and resources and blog posts for getting started and all of that good stuff.
Okay, I have 3 big takeaways from today's interview with Sabrina. I think the first one is to take it slow. Do not underestimate taking it slow. We kind of live in this world, especially in maybe westernized countries, that you got to hustle, you got to work hard, you got to, just go all in if you're really serious about something. And well, maybe that's not you. I don't think it's me, but maybe it's not you. So taking it slow, taking it at a pace in which you can keep up with, I think is really important. I think takeaway number 2 is to just shoot a ton, right? So when you go out and you shoot, like I end every episode, the more that you shoot today, the better you're going to be tomorrow. I really mean it. The more that you actually do the thing, the better you're going to get at it. So the more photos that you put in, the better you're going to get at taking photos, right? The more push-ups you do, the better you're going to get at taking or doing push-ups, right? So shoot a ton. And then step number 3 is really to invest in your education, because especially in something like photography, right? I think there are so many new words and terms and ideas that come into your lexicon of learning photography, right? From aperture to lenses to zooms to primes to full frame to crop to, UHS speeds of your SD card. So many things. And that in and of itself, I believe, caused me a lot of overwhelm in the beginning. And I did find that when I felt like I reluctantly took out my debit card or whatever and invested in some education, I noticed that right away I did see some sort of return on my investment, because not only was I learning something specific that I needed to, but also in a cohesive way that wasn't just jumbling all over YouTube, and by being taught by somebody who, if I needed to ask questions, I could lean on them and get some more clarification. So those are the 3 things. Take it slow, shoot a ton, and invest in your education. Those are my biggest takeaways. I would love to know what your biggest takeaway is. And I would love to hear it if you were to join the Beginner Photography Podcast community on Facebook. That is the perfect place to share it. I was trying to figure out what am I trying to say out here, But the community on Facebook, the Beginner Photography Podcast community on Facebook, is one of the most friendly places on the internet for new photographers. And I really believe that if you want to grow your skills as a photographer, one of the best ways to do that is to surround yourself with others who are just as passionate about photography as you and can provide helpful answers to your questions, even give feedback on some photos. So again, join the most helpful community on the internet for new photographers like yourself. You can head over to beginnerphotographypodcast.com and click the link on the homepage now. No searching Facebook, no trying to figure out, is this it? Is that wait? Just head over to beginnerphotographypodcast.com and click the link there. Now that is it for this week. Again, thank you so much for tuning in to this week's episode of the Beginner Photography Podcast, brought to you by CloudSpot. CloudSpot is the easiest way to deliver and sell your photos online. And if you want to learn more about CloudSpot, I highly recommend that you do. You can do so by heading over to deliverphotos.com. And remember, the more that you shoot today, the better you will be tomorrow. I mean it. I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you for listening to the Beginner Photography Podcast. If you enjoy the show, consider leaving a review in iTunes. Keep shooting, and we'll see you next week.